Okay, so learning objective 9, presentation and analysis. For the presentation part, your receivables are current assets reported at their net realizable value, which translates into accounts receivable less allowance for doubtful accounts. What are we really going to collect? That's what we report on the financial statement. It'll be shown, you know, you have your current assets, you've got your cash. Your short-term investments are a little bit more liquid than your receivables, so receivables are going to generally be about your third item in your current assets section. So that's presentation is fairly straightforward. The analysis, they talk about the accounts receivable turnover ratio and the collection period in days. So just to do a little on the mechanics of that, account receivable turnover, you take your net credit sales divided by your average net accounts receivable. Net credit sales, sales less your returns and allowances, gives you net credit sales. Average net accounts receivable, that means you go accounts receivable less your allowance for doubtful accounts. And then to get the average, you simply take your beginning accounts receivable, beginning net accounts receivable plus your ending, divide it by 2, and that gives you your average. So let's look at brief exercise 8.12. And this is the 3M company, and they give us net credit sales of 20 billion, so I'm just going to do 20. And then they give us the receivables at the beginning of the year were 2.7 billion, and at the end 2.8. So we've got our net credit sales, but we have to go beginning plus ending, so we would go 2.7 at the beginning plus 2.8 at the end. We'd divide that by 2, and so we would end up with, 5.5, you can still see over here, 5.5 divided by 2 would equal average accounts receivable of 2.75. Okay? So we would go divided by average accounts receivable of 2.75, and we would get our turnover ratio of 7.27 times. Now that's a very meaningful number. What does it mean? It means on average we collect our accounts receivable about 7 times each period. Okay. Would that be better? Say we had done it and we came out with 10 times. Which one would you rather have? Which would be better? To help answer that, sometimes it's helpful to compute the collection period in days. That can help to answer, or to make it easier to see. So what we would be computing here is the average collection period in days. Okay, so how do we do that? We simply, let me separate this a little bit. We simply take the number of days in the year, 365, and we divide it by our turnover ratio. So we go divided by 7.27, and when we divide that out, we would get about 50 days. So on average, we're collecting our receivables every 50 days. Well, that's pretty good. But what if it were 10? 365 divided by 10. Here, every 36.5 days, we would be collecting our receivables, rather than 50 days. So chances are we'd rather have a higher ratio in these instances than a low one. And when you're working with any of the ratios to really help understand them, sometimes it's good to go through this exercise and say, okay, so this is the answer. Obviously, it doesn't tell us much on its own. You'd want to see how the company was doing in the past years. You might want to see how it compared to other similar companies in its industry. But just doing a simple thing of saying, okay, so what if it were a little higher? Would that be better or worse? It helps you to understand what's going on with it. Okay. Okay, so that takes care of our presentation and analysis section.